And what else did Jehoiada do to preserve the covenant line of David? Well, remember last week the covenant renewal ceremony of 2 Chronicles 23 verse 16. King, priests, Levites, people, all must serve the Lord in their respective places. And the making and the keeping of these vows helped establish Joash as the rightful king in the people's mind, even though he was only 7, and even though people thought he was dead, and even though Athaliah had reigned for 6 years. That ceremony cemented Joash as the king in the thoughts of the people. Then there was the matter of Joash's covenant education. Joash had secret lessons, private instruction from his adopted parents, Jehoiada the high priest and Jehoshaphat, his aunt, for 6 years in their house in the temple complex. And now 7-year-old King Josiah is yet a minor. And in this situation, think of how in the wide world a 7-year-old could govern. In this situation, Jehoiada must have served as something of a regent. And as the boy grew up, even then, he must have and did advise Joash a great deal. 2 Kings 22 verse 2, 2 Kings 12 verse 2 rather, the parallel chapter, states that Jehoiada instructed Joash. This is what God's word says, Joash. You are the king of God's people. You are responsible before Jehovah of governing in accordance with the word of Christ. And so 2 Chronicles 24 verse 2 says, Joash did that which was right in the sight of the Lord all the days of Jehoiada the priest. And then there's something else. Jehoiada also sought to ensure the Davidic succession by taking for Joash 2 wives. 2 wives increases the chances of Joash having a son. That's necessary. And 2 wives restrains him from taking many wives, as practically all the other kings did. But still, it should have been 1 man and 1 woman, even for the king. This is a bit of a concession. Jehoiada took for him, says verse 3. The high priest took for him 2 wives. Here are the girls you should marry, said the high priest. And from those 2 women, Joash begat sons and daughters. Now, having given us these details of the restored Davidic king and ensuring the succession of Joash's seed on the throne, we have these reassuring words of verse 2. Joash did that which was right in the sight of the Lord all the days of Jehoiada the priest. Or are they reassuring words? Are they warning us of ill to come after Jehoiada's death? Joash did what was right in the sight of the Lord all the days of Jehoiada the priest. But what about the days after Jehoiada's death? And with that question, and with our introductory comments on the first 3 verses, we now want to consider what constitutes the bulk of our text, verses 4 through 14, on King Joash's temple repairs. We've seen baby Joash's wonderful deliverance and boy Joash's successful coronation. Now we have King Joash's temple repairs. First, the authority for his temple repairs. Second, the financing of his temple repairs. And third, the completion of his temple repairs. King Joash's temple repairs. The authority for it, the financing of it, and the completion of it. Right at the start, I want to ask a rather general question. Whose calling is it in Judah to repair the temple? Because the temple certainly needed repair. You have 130 years of wear and tear on this temple since Solomon had built it. 130 years. Buildings need repairs. Your parents know about that. And we have, more especially, the damage done to the temple by Athaliah and her sons. Verse 7. The sons of Athaliah, that wicked woman, broke up the house of God, and also the dedicated things of the temple they bestowed upon Baal. The phrase there is the sons of Athaliah. What is meant by the sons of Athaliah? It could refer to her oldest sons before they were killed by the Arabians. It could refer to Ahaziah, her youngest son, who became king after her husband Jehoram. Or the sons of Athaliah could be a more general term, simply referring to those in Judah who worshipped Baal. The sons of Athaliah, who introduced Baal worship, and all who followed her in that were just called the sons of Athaliah. I suppose it's hard for us to say. I don't think much hangs upon it. So then, whose calling is it to repair the temple? And it needs repairing. This is a question for us because we're not that familiar with things in Old Testament Israel. But the people in Judah, this wasn't a question for them because they knew the answer. But for us, it bears asking it. Well, what were the options? You're familiar with the three main offices in Israel and here in the southern kingdom of Judah. You have prophets, priests, and kings. With a little bit of further reflection, you might think of other office bearers in the Old Testament, such as elders, judges, Levites, and captains of the army. But some of those are extensions of the king. The king was the commander-in-chief, and the captains of the army served the king. The judges and the elders, not now talking about judges in the sense of the book of Judges, but the judges and the elders, they were extensions and servants of the king in judging and ruling in local and smaller affairs. And the Levites were helpers to the priests. So you're back again with these three main Old Testament offices: prophets, priests, and kings. But what about the prophets? What was their role in Israel? Well, they received God's word and they proclaimed it to God's people. That doesn't really fit with temple repairs. Of the three main offices in Israel, the prophets were the least institutionalized. The prophets were not all from one tribe. The Levites and priests were from one tribe, Levi. The prophets were not all from one family. The kings were all from one family, the family of David in the tribe of Judah. But prophets were from various tribes, and there was no succession among the prophets. It wasn't the case that your son would necessarily be a prophet after you. And usually that was not the case. And with the prophets, there was no hierarchy. The kings, then there were princes and rulers and so on under them. The priests, well, you had a high priest at the top, and then priests, and then Levites. And then there were other sorts of Levites. But there was no hierarchy at all with the prophets. And the prophets didn't have the authority to repair the temple.